my name's Hannah and you're listening to the Brunel Let's Talk About It Mental Health and Wellbeing podcast. So today's episode is all about transitioning to university life. This will be really good for all the new starters, everyone who's coming in to start in September. And yeah, we'll be just talking about some tips and tricks about settling in, about getting used to university life, because it is quite different from perhaps how you were working before in school and how you sort of approached it. So this will be quite an interesting topic, and I've got a very interesting guest here today. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thank you. My name's Dr. Nick Worsfold. I'm a member of staff in the Department of Life Sciences. So by background, I'm an ecologist. I teach environmental science and geography. But I'm also Associate Pro Vice Chancellor for education with a focus on student experience. And so students transitioning to university is something I'm really interested in. I think it's something we can really help to make a soft landing and to make sure that students who arrive at Brunel know that they're welcome and that we want to help them to get up to speed with how I might phrase it is how to be a student and how to get good at being a student.
Yeah.
And that was something that took me quite a while as a student myself. So I'm really interested in making that as smooth as possible for our students.
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think I wish I knew sooner as well when I first started, because there's so many things I look back and I'm like, I wish I didn't do that. So it'd be good for the new starters to know how to deal with that. So the first topic that I wanted to sort of cover is understanding how university is different to school. So what would you say is the biggest change or the biggest difference between school and university?
So I guess the most obvious change when you first get here is the scale. We're a big institution. We've got thousands of people here, both students and staff. And so sometimes that can feel a bit overwhelming, particularly if you came from a school or college where everyone knew everyone else. Certainly when I arrived at university, I was in a sixth form with a relatively small group of people. We all knew each other. We all knew all the staff. And then suddenly you're in an environment where everyone's a stranger. So that can be a real change and a big challenge. I think those social interactions in your first few weeks are also really important.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the learning, the teaching style can be very different. We tend to expect students to move from their college or A-level or school studies where it's quite knowledge focused into asking, well, what do you think? What are your ideas? We want you to take these three sources and suddenly integrate them to make something new. And that's a big intellectual step. And our job as academics is to help students along that pathway.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is quite a big thing where when you first start uni, you're like, okay, not to disregard how colleges and high schools run, but you're like, okay, I'm not as spoon-fed. There's a lot that I have to do myself. And if I don't do it, that's it.
And that also is really important for students coming from other academic cultures.
Yeah.
So if you're an international student, it might be that you're really experienced at studying your discipline. You might have done 3-4 years already, but it's a difference coming to the UK educational culture. Quite a lot of my international master students, for example, notice that we ask them for their opinions and we want them to be more original than perhaps they're used to in their home culture.
Yeah. Okay, on a more personal scale, what do you think are some of the biggest changes and differences that you felt when you first started university?
So independence is obviously one of them.
Yeah.
Not being monitored is another one. Sometimes I think we get into a habit of good behaviours when we're at school or college, because if we don't, someone's going to check. And then suddenly...
Yeah, if you do, you also get rewarded, like stickers and stuff.
Right, and people notice if you're not there. And that independence that we ask our students to demonstrate on day one is sometimes really, really hard. And, I only need to look in the mirror for someone who could have been a little bit better at that when they first went to university. When I started, I think I also made the mistake of underestimating the difference in the social dynamics. I was in a big lecture theatre. It was actually quite hard to make friends in my first year. And it wasn't really until I was in my second year and did some more small group teaching. As an ecologist, I also did a field course in Scotland, which was brilliant because about 30 of us went and we all got to know each other really well. So that was a transformational experience for me. When we got back from Scotland, suddenly we were a cohort.
Yeah.
So some of the things I talked to academic colleagues and professional services colleagues about is how can we make sure we build that into our programme design? How can we make sure those study groups, those tutorials that have a much smaller scale can help to build that sense of identity and sense of belonging? Because if we can get that right, I think that's half the battle.
Okay, so talking about the challenges that come with transitioning, because that's one of the things that I think we really want to cover in this podcast is the things that the students face that will be quite challenging for them. What would you say in terms of expectations for students coming to university? What would you say as an advice for that?
Be open-minded.
Yeah.
Recognise that it's different. It's better than school.
Yeah.
But there are some big challenges that are associated with that change. Understand that the learning that you'll do will often take place outside the classroom. I think one of the biggest differences is that a lot of learning in school and college happens in the class.
Yeah.
Whereas often we tend to talk about our lectures or our seminars being the tip of the iceberg educationally. And we then expect students to go away and look at the other 90%, which might be reading, it might be small groups, it might be interactions with friends and colleagues. So that difference in the amount of class-based activity and then the expectations of what happens afterwards, I think is a key difference that many students find difficult to accommodate that change.
Yeah, I think I remember in first year, I just realised how important the reading was. I just thought it'll be okay if I don't read it, but you need it. You need to read that, and it really helps with just writing out your work. It's for you. Like a lot of people think that it's like the lecturers don't get anything out of giving that to you, you know? It's like something that you need to do to get better grades. So
absolutely. And I think sometimes it's really difficult to choose what to start with. So don't ever be afraid. Students should never be afraid to go to their academics who are teaching them and say, can you rank these?
Yeah.
There are 10 things on the reading list. Where should I start? Where should I go next? Because that knowledge and understanding builds up. The other thing I would say with reading is make it productive. If you had to fill in a timesheet, what have you done today, and show someone your work, would you actually have an artifact that you could point out and say, look, I haven't just done some reading. Yeah. I've actually done some reading and then some thinking and then produced some notes that will be useful for tomorrow.
I think also with reading, there's like active reading and there's just literally just writing on a piece of paper. Like I've seen the difference of when I'm genuinely trying to learn what's on the paper rather than let me just quickly finish a chapter and get it done. So I think that's a big thing as well. So, you know, I think also one of the biggest things that are quite different from school is the independence aspect, which we sort of spoke about. But, you know, there's a lot of things that I think, because a lot of students are also living alone for the first time when they come to uni. And there's other things that come with uni apart from the academic side. You've got the balancing, you know, work and studying and experience and all of that to get as many things on your CV, I guess. What would you say to students who are dealing with that and will be dealing with that soon?
So I think being away from home for the first time is a challenge for everybody. And that's not something to feel worried about or bad about. If you're not settling in very well, you're not alone. There are lots of people who are finding that difficult as well because it is a hard thing to do. So I think the first thing would be if you've arrived and you don't feel like you're having the best time, you don't feel like you've made the right friends, sometimes it just does take time.
Yeah.
Get involved in other things. Join a student union society. Get involved in sport. Go to the gym. Find your cohort. Find your group. And sometimes it's really great when students have multiple groups of friends. I was really lucky because I played university football. I had a totally different set of friends. I typically only saw them on a Wednesday night and a Saturday, or Wednesday afternoon and a Saturday. And that was just a nice break from my flatmates and from my course mates. So actually having 3 groups was just really, really useful for me because it was just a change throughout the week. Yeah,
I think that's a thing that I think it can be quite daunting for new students when they first start is trying to take that first step of let me join this society or let me get in touch with these people. But, you know, I mean, especially at Brunel, I think they're very friendly here. Absolutely. Everyone's really kind.
Yeah, and also don't forget, if you do want to go and join a society, when you knock on that door or send that email or make that phone call and say, I really like what you've organised. Can I come and help, please? That's a really... No one's going to say no to that. That's a great thing.
We need all the help.
So, I mean, I always say to colleagues, if I see a student walking around campus with a hoodie that says Brunel or student union or a club or a society or a sport, I don't have to worry about them
Yeah.
because they're embedded within the society. They're part of our culture. They belong here and they know they belong here.
Oh, I think that's quite nice that even staff notice stuff like that. See, they're okay. All right. So talking about change of pace, that's another one that I think is quite a difficult thing for students. We sort of spoke about this as well, but there's less contact time because it's just the lectures. And then if some modules have seminars and stuff like that. So in terms of that, because obviously with it being in a lecture, there's quite a lot of information that's not dumped on you, but sort of dumped on you. What would you say to students to deal with that?
So I would say it is totally overwhelming to be in a lecture. And you find that there's so much covered in the short space of time. I think also now, because we use more digital tools to support that learning, there's a lack of understanding of the expectation of, should I be writing all this down? Or is this going to be recorded? And if so, am I ever going to go back and read it? So I think that understanding of, here's a 2-hour session, we're going to cover a lot of ground, and this is what I'd like you to take from it, is actually really difficult to understand. When I see students not making notes in my lectures, it freaks me out. Yeah. Because I can't remember if I don't write things down. You said 10 minutes ago. So I think the way I always see it is a lecture or a seminar or a workshop is a social learning environment. And I'm going to use that to introduce the content of what I want people to learn about. And I think that if you don't write it down, if you don't do the reading, if you don't make those connections, it's really difficult when it comes to assessment time to know what to do with that. Yeah. Because when we're giving lectures, it's not a lesson. Yeah. And if you just go to the lectures and you do nothing else, when it comes to assessment, you're not going to be as successful. So I always think of my lectures as a start point, a primer, the tip of the iceberg to begin that learning of that topic. And what I want to do is motivate people. I want to give them enough knowledge and understanding to access that reading and to understand it. But I also ideally want to motivate them to go and do it because they think it's interesting. Yeah, I think that's always like the best lectures is the one where the lecturers are genuinely wanting to motivate you into to doing well and to actually enjoy the lesson. Okay, so procrastination. This is, I think, one of the most frequent things and most common things I hear from students. I personally did it a lot in first year. What would you say to students who procrastinate or put off or skip lectures? First of all, you are not alone. Yeah. I'm very good at this too. What I would say is, if you are an arch procrastinator and if you find the concept of having a blank page at the beginning, you set yourself a task, right, I'm going to start this assignment today, and you look at that blank white screen, don't worry, everyone gets that feeling. Yeah. Do one thing first and don't necessarily start at the beginning. So just writing something can be useful. Sometimes even writing anything, just to get in that habit, get in that process. Writing is a little bit like running. Yeah. Everyone can do it. Some people are naturally better at others, but if you don't train it, you're not going to be as good as you potentially could be. So getting used to writing, getting used to doing work in chunks. I tend to advise, set yourself a sort of 45 minutes to an hour chunk of time, and then maybe go and have a break, come back and do something else. Yeah. If you can bear to turn your phone off, do so. We all know that WhatsApp ping is irresistible. So sometimes I leave my phone in another place when I'm working. Yeah. Sometimes I disconnect myself from my email or Teams or anything else. If the task is to write something today, sometimes all I do is open Notepad, because even the formatting in Word distracts me. So I literally just get the digital equivalent of a blank page and a pencil and start writing paragraphs. Yeah. The other thing I would say when it comes to writing would be, think of the paragraph as the unit. Write a paragraph. If that's all you've got, go and have a break. Come back and do another one, do another one, do another one. Before you know it, you've got a couple of thousand words. Yeah. I think also another thing that I learned now that I've finished my degree is
when I used to start work, I would be like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, or because I'm quite a perfectionist sometimes, so I'm like, it has to be perfect. So the thing that helped me is when I finished, I remember thinking, oh, that wasn't that bad. So I tell myself to remind myself that it's always never as bad as you think it is. You overthink it so much, and by the time you do it, you're like, oh, okay, it wasn't that bad. Just remember that feeling you had at the end, and you know that it's capable. You've done it before. You can do it again.
That's a good bit of advice. Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.
Yeah.
And sometimes, if you need to produce something in that day, then something's better than nothing.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I think one of the things, I think you as a lecturer will probably know this. In the beginning, there's a lot more students in the class than towards the end, right? I've seen it. I've seen that it's a pattern that's quite common. What would you say to students who fall into that sort of slippery slope of skipping one lecture and then it ends up being half of them?
So I think what I will do is preface that by saying I understand the challenges some of my students have in terms of making ends meet and jobs and that sort of thing. So I know some students have an incredibly difficult balance between choosing what activities to do. So let's put that to one side first and say, imagine the student who's not at work when they're not in class. They're just not in class.
Yeah.
I would say being there is one of the easiest safety nets to give yourself.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
Because as an undergrad student, I never once successfully answered an exam question on the basis of content that I wasn't in the room when it was taught. And I know now we've got, lecture capture software and that sort of thing, but it's not the same thing.
It isn't.
It's about listening and writing and thinking. So I always say the notes you take from my lecture is not mine, they're yours. The slides are mine. That's my communication tool on the day.
Yeah.
But the notes you capture is your interpretation of what I'm trying to teach you.
Yeah.
And that's the personalised, contextualised understanding you've developed in that 2 hours.
That's literally the learning part, yeah.
That's the learning part, right. So if you haven't been there to do that, when it comes to assessment, you've got a mountain to climb if you haven't been there regularly.
Yeah. I think it's really bad because I remember in second year, for me, it was quite different. I was okay in first year, sort of left it in second, then picked up in third year again. And what I kept doing is I'd miss one. I'd be like, oh, I've already missed one. I haven't caught up with that yet. Let me miss the next one. And then I keep doing that. And before I know it, I'm literally cramming 9 lessons into like a week. I think one of the things I would say if like you're a student is don't think because you miss one lecture, you have to miss the next one. Because that you sometimes tell yourself like, oh, I need to catch up with that first. No, just go. Because it will just end up piling on and on and on, and then you're going to really struggle at the end. And also, it's like a habit. If you start once, it's easier to do it the next time and the next time and the next time. So I definitely would say just try to stay away from that habit because it's a very slippery slope.
I'd also say, particularly for those students who are in smaller cohorts or a smaller group, I've heard students be a bit worried that because they missed something, that somehow their lecturer is going to be cross with them. Yeah. So they then miss the next one. Yeah. We're never cross with you. Yeah. We just want you to be there learning. Yeah. That's all we really want.
Okay, so talking about the more, social aspect of university, like we were speaking about, you're living alone for the first time for a lot of students. You're moving into a new environment. What would you say about, students who are trying to find their place, I guess, in university? So in terms of, making friends, settling in, what would you say for students who are new in that way?
So back to what I just said, be there.
Yeah.
The easiest way to make friends is in the classroom. So if you do have a bit of a patchy attendance record, it's difficult to meet people. You're not going to get that invitation to go and have a coffee between classes. You're not going to get that invitation to the party later because you just weren't there. The second thing I would say is be proactive. So again, back to looking at the other opportunities for meeting people, whether that's in the student union or societies, clubs, faith-based groups. There's a lot of things going on all the time.
Yeah.
So don't sit in your room wondering, just get out there and say hi.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of, so we know that there's a lot of stuff that Brunel does to make sure that students feel, comfortable, safe, supported in many different ways. I thought it would be good for us to just cover some of the stuff that we do for students. So what help is available for students in terms of lecture content and asking questions in that regard?
So if you've got a question, the best time to ask it is always at the end of the lecture. particularly if it's something about the content, the clarification, something you didn't quite understand. If you're maybe asking for some extra reading, go and speak to the lecturer at the end. That's often the best time.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes lead to really interesting conversations. And sometimes as a lecturer, that question someone's asked helps me to reflect on what I've just taught. And sometimes I'll then send a note to the whole class to say, hey, I got a really interesting question at the end. For everyone's benefit, maybe I wasn't so clear on this bit, or this was a really interesting tangent. Here's the answer.
Yeah.
If there's something that you're finding difficult, academic staff will have office hours. They will be available to meet with you. So build those relationships. We want people to learn. So go and ask your lecturer. You'll all have a personal tutor. And so catching up with your personal tutor a couple of times a term is also a great way of navigating around the institution. If there are things that you need support with and perhaps you can't find the answers, we've actually just produced some new guidance and a handbook for all personal tutors. So they should be really able to direct you to the right place.
Yeah. About asking questions, I think also sometimes it can be quite daunting to ask a question in a lecture, but something that helped me is knowing that someone else might have the same questions. You're also helping someone else. You could be helping someone else potentially. So, don't just think like, oh, what if I ask this and it's stupid? First of all, no, there's no stupid questions. And every lecturer I speak to, they always say the same thing, like, no question's stupid. So, the lecturers are really lovely. They're not going to judge you for your questions.
No, I think also it's worth remembering that when someone asks a question, it's because they've listened to what you've said and they're interested enough to ask a question. So it's actually quite flattering.
Yeah.
So never feel that you don't want to ask a question or that it's a stupid question or anything like that.
And also makes it quite engaging, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In terms of if students feel like they're struggling with their well-being and mental health, I mean, this is a mental health and well-being podcast, so I would like to put emphasis on this, of course. What is available for students in terms of that?
So, I mean, in many ways, you're the expert here. So that from an academic perspective, I'll start there. What you should do is keep us informed. Build those relationships with your personal tutor. And then as you progress through your studies, you might have other lecturers you know better than others. You might have a project supervisor in your third year who, because you're meeting more frequently, you get to know a little bit better. So where you're struggling a little bit, let someone know. That can really help to be proactive about engaging with, for example, the extenuating circumstances processes. Don't wait till it gets acute before you let us know that you need a bit of help.
Yeah.
Because everyone needs a bit of help at some point. 3 years is a long time for an undergrad degree, and it's very unusual that somebody doesn't need any help over that period. So you're not asking for anything that hundreds of other people aren't already doing.
Yeah.
So I think that first thing would be, let us know.
Yeah.
Even if there's nothing that is urgent that needs doing yet, just having that conversation, helps to feel a bit better that you've offloaded some of that, but also it means that member of staff can be aware of your circumstances. Maybe you want them to go and speak to a colleague. So your personal tutor might just go and knock on someone else's door and say, I've just had a chat with so-and-so, just to be aware. For example, their mum's not well. Their attendance might be a bit patchy. They might not quite be themselves. Keep an eye on them. And we do that all the time. We walk down our corridors in our departments and just where we've got that information, we can just keep a check out on people.
Yeah.
But if you haven't told us in the first place, suddenly then it can all kind of build up. And the first we hear about it is where suddenly you haven't been attending, or you've missed an assessment deadline, or you haven't come to your exam. And then it's much harder to help because things have already been missed.
Yeah, I think with an important thing is also like we have the support profile, right, which students can do. And there's a whole episode on this. I think it's called Disability and Dyslexia, right? It was episode 2, yeah. And it's if you want to know more about making a support profile, that's a full episode basically dedicated to that. But, you can make a support profile and it can help you with extenuating circumstances, doing exams and stuff like that, and just in general, just getting the support that you need. Okay, we also have other sort of little things that we do on campus that can help students with their work. Do you mind just introducing some of them a little bit?
So yeah, from an academic point of view, we've got things like peer-assisted learning, where older groups of students come together to help coach and train students in their first year. That's often in a smaller group. a great place to get to know students who've been through what you're going through now. They've literally just done it 12 months earlier, so they're really well placed to give you that advice and to help you understand. And sometimes if there are questions that you don't want to ask your academic lecturer, then you can go to the PAL session, peer-assisted learning, and ask someone who's just done it the year before. So that's the session where there really are no stupid questions because everyone has just done it.
Yeah.
Other things would be the academic skills team that we call ASK. And that's a great place to go if you recognise either before you've submitted work or typically when you've got a bit of feedback that you just need to upskill a little bit in one area. So let's say you recognise your academic writing skills need a bit of work, or your data analysis and statistics for a particular assignment, you need to do a bit more work on that. The academic skills team are brilliant at helping you to quickly get that support and to develop those skills that perhaps you might feel that other people on your course have already got, or you might feel that you want to, you've got some marks and you want to know, how do I get an extra 5-10%? How do I get myself into that upper category in terms of degree classifications? And so the ASK team is a great place to go to just, again, build those skills, develop that experience, and be able to just get that little bit of extra marks in your assessments. Okay.
Also, I wanted to speak about finding what works for you. And I mean this in a more informal sense. So a lot of students, this is something that I spoke to. We were basically, me and my friend, we had to sort of help the first year settle in for psychology. And we were talking about, what you could do to sort of help you settle in. And they already had their group chat sort of set up for all the students. And I was talking to Nick, not you, Nick.
Nick Pound, head of psychology. Yeah.
I know. We were speaking about, having a group chat. Now, the thing that I would like to say in this is that some students love the group chat. Some don't. I've not been in it in the 3 years. My friend, she loves it. It was great for her. But for me, it wasn't good because I sometimes find it a bit stressful when it'd be a deadline and everyone's saying what they think they should do. But I think that's a great way for students to sort of get to know each other and also get updates on what's happening in lectures. So what would you say for students who, what works for them, being comfortable with making that decision of not maybe doing what everyone else does or maybe doing what everyone else does?
Yeah, the WhatsApp group chat's an interesting one. I'm interested to hear that you've found that a little bit stressful sometimes. I think sometimes with the larger programs where you might have, I don't know, maybe in the first week the class rep says, I'm going to start a class group chat and it's got 250 people on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes the advice on there is not the best. If I had £1 for every time a student of mine had said, oh, but I heard that relating to assessment in particular. So what I would definitely say is think of the group chat as a first starting point for information, absolutely not the definitive endpoint. And if something that someone's saying on there doesn't kind of seem right, go and check with an academic member of staff, go and check with the module lead, the person running that assessment, your personal tutor, whoever it might be, because some of the advice that we know has been shared on that has been wrong.
Yeah.
And people have done the wrong thing and got lower marks because of it. So I think anything that helps community building, great. Anything that helps people feel connected to their course and their department and their peers is brilliant. But yeah, with the larger ones, take advice on there with a large pinch of salt.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I wanted to say to sort of wrap up this episode, what would be your, I guess, ultimate sort of final tip to all first year students who are starting?
So my ultimate tip is actually what I do with my new tutees on the first time I meet them. And it might seem a bit counterintuitive as a transition activity, but I ask them where they want to be in 5 years' time.
Oh, I think that's great. Yeah.
And I actually ask them to go and find some jobs that they imagine they'd like to apply for in 3 years' time.
Yeah.
So actually, I think while we often want to appeal to, the students wanting to be part of a community and having fun and wanting to be in class because their friends are there, sometimes you do need that instrumental in the back of your mind. I'm here to get a better job in the future. I'm here because I'm ambitious and I want to get on in life. And there's nothing wrong with that. So having that drive of, even if someone doesn't know, and this depends on which subject you're in. Obviously, if you're here to study physiotherapy, you want to be a physiotherapist.
Yeah.
If you're here studying nursing, you want to be a nurse. Whereas for lots of other disciplines, the range of different careers and graduate outcomes you can get are very different. But even having 3 or 4 in mind, you might not ever want to do that. 3 years is a long time when you start at 18 or 19. But just having that motivator of, okay, these are the skills and competencies I need. The great thing about lots of job adverts these days is you've got a list of essential and desirable criteria. So you can almost use that to benchmark your skill set and think, if I want to be an ecological consultant in 3 years' time, how am I going to get these skills? And some of them are academic and things that we're going to do throughout the program. Others might not be. So, for example, if you want to be an ecological consultant, you typically need a driver's license. That might be something that, because where you're going to go as part of your job requires using a car.
Yeah.
So that might be something where one of my students on their first day might think, okay, well, I live in West London. I don't need a car to get here. That's something one summer I need to save a bit of money and I need to get my license. Or it might be that, working as part of a team is really, really important for that particular career. And so you might think, okay, I need to develop alongside my studies some examples of teamwork, leadership, and some of those softer skills.
I think that's a good point. We were speaking about this in the last episode very briefly, but it's about, you don't need to know exactly where you're going, but a rough idea would be good place to start, just because there's certain things that you'll do after your degree where there'll be certain things they expected you to do alongside your degree. So for me, I'm applying for postgraduate, and there's certain things that they expect for certain courses, especially mental health. So they would expect a little bit of experience. So it's good if you sort of get that in through your degree so that you're sort of prepared for the next step. So have a little bit of a rough idea.
Absolutely. And one way that Brunel's really successful in getting our graduates those skills is through our placements.
Yeah.
So go and have a chat with the Professional Development Centre colleagues. Think about how you might develop those skills as part of a work-based placement, either as a traditional year out between your second and third year or during the summertime. And the key thing with that sort of experience is the first week or two gets you 70 or 80% of that. What you're really looking for is a story you can tell in a job interview.
Yeah.
Can you have enough information about that thing to be able to convince an employer that you're the right person for them? And if you've done nothing, it's really, really difficult to do that. If you've done 4 weeks one summer, that might be enough.
I think also related to that is, you can do volunteering as well. So we have the volunteering office that can sort of help you get volunteering roles related to your degree. And then also I think if you're looking at doing jobs or anything, there's a lot of things that Brunel has that can sometimes be an opportunity for you that would be really good. Like, for an example, with me doing my psychology degree, they had these things to do a BPS ambassador role, which was really good because again, stuff on your CV.
British Psychological Society.
Yes. Yeah, I always forget. I need to sometimes say what these things are. But anyways, so it was really good to sort of take those chances, even though sometimes it can be quite daunting and you think, okay, I don't know if I'm going to get it. I don't know if it's good. Just do it. Honestly, that's what I would say. Just go for every opportunity you get.
The other thing I'd say on that is don't discount your part-time job as a source of experience and those stories.
Yeah.
So sometimes I find our students almost disregard the fact that let's say they work in Sainsbury's, and actually they've been working in Sainsbury's 15, 20 hours a week for 3 or 4 years now, and they're quite senior at what they do and they're really talented, so they're really good at what they do. And sometimes you forget that actually, when, as a barman and waiter when I was a student, some shifts I was actually managing people because I'd been doing it a lot longer than they had. But it's difficult to contextualize that in light of an application for a graduate job. But actually that experience of managing people is crucial for some roles and actually way more important than some of the academic things. So, if you're going to have a part-time job that's not necessarily at graduate level, don't discount those soft skills and those experiences. Just get good at capturing that and telling stories about it so that when you're in that job interview, you can nail that answer to the question.
Is there anything else you'd like to...
So I think my final tip would be think of yourself as a trainee. Think of yourself as a trainee graduate. So even though you just started, and for thinking about student transition, we might be talking about someone who's not 19 yet and has only been here a few weeks. But if you can get that mindset where you've got your goal and you are starting to think, okay, my graduate job is going to be something like this. And I think some of those applied degrees, particularly things like health sciences, do that really well anyway. They feel like a trainee physiotherapist or a trainee nurse from day one.
Yeah.
If all students can think like that, yes, I'm a student, but I'm also a trainee graduate role.
That's a really good way to put it.
And think about those skills and think about behaving like a trainee as well.
Manifesting it from day one.
Yeah. I think sometimes that just helps to really, when you are procrastinating, when you've got that deadline, when you've got that blank page and you don't really want to start writing that piece of work or whatever it might be, study for that exam, that mindset of, hang on, this is just the next step. I'm a trainee. This is where I want to get to. I think that can be a powerful motivator.
Yeah, I think that's so beautifully put. Okay, so I think we'll just finish up there. Thank you so much, Nick, for coming on today. It was great speaking to you. I really enjoyed it.
Pleasure to be here.
And so for all the listeners, follow us on Instagram, like us on YouTube. Oh my God, there's so many different platforms, just trying to remember everything. Send us a message if there's anything you want us to cover next time, and subscribe. So thank you very much.